There's a feeling I can't quite shake that what we've seen in the last few days here at the Labour Party conference is the old British establishment and British capital starting to take a new approach to Corbyn and the rise of Corbynism, and that approach is about co-option. So what we've seen up at the World Transformed, the main kind of conference of the Corbyn supporting the left of the party, is discussion about radical ideas and the kind of left from across England coming together. And then it felt like so often the relevant shadow minister would kind of waltz in at the end and say a few nice things and package up that energy and channel it towards a kind of reinflation of the old system. So this was epitomised for me by a session a couple of nights ago when the wonderful post-colonial theorist Ramsay explained in great detail and with great care why you can't just take over kind of an imperial capitalist state and use it to deliver democratic socialism in a country. You need to radically reform that state. If you're going to do that, capitalist states, imperial states like the British state are not built for those purposes. And then he was followed by Emily Thornberry, the shadow foreign secretary, who basically said that the problem at the moment is that Boris Johnson's too lazy and he's not a nice guy, and she would use the structures of the British state to go and deliver justice around the world. She said we shouldn't be ashamed of the power we have in the world, we should use it for good. She was saying something totally contradictory to the argument, I think very powerful argument that Ramsay had made, and yet for much of the audience it felt like they didn't see that as a contradiction and that they were being kind of pushed towards supporting Thornberry and getting in behind this project. And if I was the British establishment, if I was the British state, if I was British capital, then I'd be fine with that. I would feel like what's going on here is a process of re-securing consent from an angry population to reinflate a system, and that really what we need to do is replace that system entirely. In an age of financial crisis, where the whole structure of global capitalism is failing, in an age of environmental crisis, where we need to take radical action on climate change now, and that means doing things like shutting down companies like BP and Shell, not compromising with them. In an age where Britain's in deep democratic crisis, this process of reinflation of the old regime worries me enormously, because they'll let people do nice things for 5 years, even 10 years. They'll let the trains be renationalised, they're owned by foreign governments. Anyway, they'll even let the rich be taxed a little bit more, because after all they've got so much richer in the last few years that they don't mind giving away a bit more of that in tax. And then after 5 years, after 10 years, there'll be another financial crisis and the Conservatives will come back in and we're back to business as normal, and people will look back on Corbynism as a way that the system was reinflated and realise that ultimately it didn't do much more than Blairism. It didn't do much more than a few nice things for a few years with little permanent change. Now that's not inevitable, and the thing that gives me hope is that some of the discussions at the conference, at the World Transformed, were about how to deliver much deeper, longer term, more systemic change. Seeing the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell talk about being in the state and against the state and beginning to think about how it is that the British state and the institutions of British capital will seek to frustrate long-term change was important. But unless Labour does a lot more of that thinking and a lot more of that intellectual heavy lifting, I'm very concerned that what we're going to realise in the coming years and decades is that this whole movement was co-opted as a way to bring back support for an ancient regime when really that regime should be overthrown.